So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Unpacking Toronto's new noise bylaws. I'm Ingrid Boudet, founder of No More Noise Toronto, a grassroots community that is taking a data-centered approach to advocating for a better sounding and healthier city. We made an impression during the city's noise bylaw review, and we are collaborating with stakeholders such as the city and municipal licensing and standards to improve processes and outcomes. In the webinar today, you'll be off camera and on mute. Please feel free to participate in the chat with comments and questions. The MLS team has access to the chat and will be answering questions in there as well as in the session. So you may know that I use Mentimeter software to anonymously collect feedback from you. So we'll be asking some questions and showing results during the session. The data from the chat and the Mentimeter will be shared with our guests. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available on No More Noise Toronto's YouTube channel shortly. I try to get that out quite quickly. So before I introduce our guests, I'd like to make a land and environment acknowledgement. While many land acknowledgements focus just on the treaties and the lines on the map, I would like to take this opportunity to focus literally on the land that our colonial activities have changed so very much. The health of an environment or ecosystem can be assessed by the sounds coming from it. And all Indigenous peoples did that for centuries and developed a way of listening that we have lost. May we reconcile not only the lines that are drawn on the maps, but also the way we interact with the land, working to restore balance and biodiversity to our planet and to ourselves. So with that, let's start talking about noise, which is defined as unwanted and or harmful sound. Noise is the #2 urban environmental health hazard, according to the World Health Organization, right after air pollution. So we've done a lot more to reduce air pollution than we have for noise pollution. So we must start working to reduce that so it doesn't become #1. Toronto is not alone. Cities all over the world are wrestling with an increase in sound levels that are impacting more people more than ever before. Our cities are getting more dense, and so one person can impact many. We have no defense or escape from sound. We can't close our ears and our bodies can't stop listening. So that's why I'm so pleased to host Municipal Licensing and Standards to talk about this problem. To me, it is very clear that the city is listening. So I thank you for your engagement, because without your participation, they won't hear us. So I'm just going to bring up a couple things here in the room. I'm flying solo here. I don't have somebody helping me with controls. So, and I'm coming to you from the 16th floor of City Hall, which is very great. And there is Councillor Saxe. So Councillor Saxe has joined us today, and she will share some opening thoughts. And also joining us will be Carleton Grant, Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards, with his opening remarks. After this, I'm going to ask a few questions to see who's in the audience and to understand your experience with logging noise reports. Then there will be the MLS. Presentation, which will be followed by a Q&A with a few more audience questions, just for good measure. So, Councillor Saxe, I am going to ask you to unmute, and I will then also spotlight you. And
well, maybe I should.
There
Okay,
you go.
There we go. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. I won't take much time. I do want to give my tributes to Ingrid, who has been absolutely a champion of addressing noise in the city and has put in untold number of unpaid hours to raise the awareness of the issue, to bring information to council and to communities, and to point out how much of a health and quality of life issue noise really is. It is hugely important and tended to be overlooked and just as something we are expected to just put up with. But in fact, the amount of noise is having real serious adverse effects on people's ability to sleep, on people's health. And we've had more and more evidence coming forward to council about the enormousness of the issue and the things we need to do about it. So I'm grateful to be able to work together with Municipal Licensing and Standards, who has been remarkably open, actually, to learning more about the issue, to working more closely with Ingrid. As some of you know, I have, out of my own pocket, have purchased a noise meter, which we're lending out to communities to create a dashboard showing where noise issues exist in my ward, specifically so that MLS can use that information to target their enforcement. We're also looking methodically at what are the repeated predictable problems, and sometimes it's amplified sound, and sometimes it's garbage collection at night, and sometimes it's motorcycles. And what can we do about those issues which are enforceable for MLS? So some of it is about collecting the data and being really clear as to what the problems are and where they're occurring and when. And some of it is about, all right, well, what tools do we have for making it better? So kudos to everybody you're going to hear from today. Thank you to everyone for being here today. This is a big issue and we can make it better than it is. So thank you, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Saxe. I very much appreciate your buying that sound level meter, and it's going to be switching up locations this week. So that is fabulous. Thank you so much. And so, Carleton, thank you for joining us today. And I am going to ask you to unmute, and I'm going to replace the spotlight with you. There you are. So thank you so much for providing your opening thoughts.
No problem, and thanks for having me. I got on just in time to hear Councillor Saxe's remarks, and I want to echo what she said, that this is an ongoing problem in our city, one that we need to work on together collaboratively. And I'm happy to partner with you, Ingrid, and thank you for your involvement and your passion for this initiative. It's one of our top 5 complaints that we get, and we get 180,000 a year, and 18,000 of them are noise complaints. So that's 10% of our workload. We enforce 30 different bylaws. This is just one of them, and it's easily our most complex, our most challenging. And that's why we're here, to continue to learn. And that's why we have great people, staff from the policy side and from the noise team here, to listen, to learn, and to continuously improve. There isn't a magic bullet. There isn't a magic wand to solve these issues. We need to continue to look at new technology and new initiatives. And the only way we learn about these is through engagement and stakeholder engagement and listening and learning. And we recognize the impact that this has on community and neighbors. And most of us live in the city and we see it all the time. We're well aware of it, and we want to work together to find solutions as well. So really want to thank you for this. I'm not able to stay for the entire event, but I'm happy my team is here, and I'm happy you invited me to give some opening remarks. This is something we're committed to, and I look forward to a great next hour for all of you that can stay. So thank you very much. To staff, to people involved, to the councillor who has a passion for this as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. And Carleton, initially when I started this, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm poking. Is this okay? And then after on Friday, when I deputed to the Service Excellence Committee, we all had a chance to have a quick conversation, and you were like, no, this is good. This is how we figure out solutions. It's a safe space. So I thank you very much for that. So I hope this is the start of a collaboration that creates a measurable improvement for the quality of life of many. So if you've ever attended one of my sessions before, you know that I like to use Mentimeter, and it is it's basically a way to anonymously collect feedback from the audience. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. I've got different monitors here, so let me go screen 2. So I am sharing my screen with instructions for how to participate in Mentimeter. Everybody is anonymous. You basically are assigned a number in the spreadsheet. And so every answer that you provide after that, after the first answer, will be connected to that first answer. And you'll kind of see why that's important. I have a logic to this. I know that won't surprise you. So go to menti.com and type in that code 737331240, or you can participate on your phone by scanning that QR code. I'm going to have it also for the next couple of slides as well. Where is my mouse? There we are. Okay, so first, what I'd like to know is who's in the house? What interest group do you represent? And if your interest group is not represented here, please put it in the chat so that I know that I can put that in later. So we've got, according to Zoom, we've got 53 people online. So thank you for taking your lunch hour with me and us. So we've got 14 residents, 5 residents associations, 1 civil society org, city councillor staff. Well, I think they're all sitting actually right in the room right now. So we also have city staff and nobody from industry and 1 person from other. So please, please pop that in the chat, because then I can have a look at that later and see what I should be adding to my chart. So here's the big question that I always ask is, what noise source disturbs you the most? And I ask this because I ask it every single time. And so now when I ask these questions, you'll be able to see how this all links, right? Because this is where it's so interesting, because as Carleton was saying, you know, noise is a 10% of their business, yet all of these noise sources here, moving vehicles is generally the most popular one. And it is the one that they are the most restricted in enforcing, and we'll get into that. Amplified sound, gas-powered lawn equipment, we've got 3 for stationary air sources, 1 for construction, 2 for sirens, beepers, and horns, which is provincially regulated, 15 for moving vehicles, 2 for other. Okay, you others need to put that in the chat too, please. And the numbers keep coming up here. 1 for fireworks. Okay, well, yes, I can understand that. All right, next question. You can continue answering these. I will be sharing the Menti slides. So have you reported your noise source to 311? So we've got 19 that say yes, 10 that say no, 1 that says I can't. And I don't see any other, oh, we got 2 that says I can't, 19, 20, yes, 11 no's. Is that going to change anymore? I like this because it feels like it's dynamic, and it also feels like I can, even though you guys don't have your cameras on and your microphones, you can still voice. And I believe that's so important. So if you were able to submit a report, how satisfied were you with the outcome? 19, not satisfied. 1, somewhat satisfied. 12, did not log report. And this is just to create the baseline. From today, we start the conversation about how people can become more satisfied and how we can improve the process. Clearly, the city's listening and they're looking to collaborate. So I'm very thankful for this. And, you know, it's kind of like, I was going to draw some sort of analogy, but sometimes when you start with a very poor baseline, progress can come very quickly. So I think this is actually an excellent opportunity for improvement. So if you were not satisfied, what was lacking? And this is some of the data that I believe we need, and some of the conversation that we need to start having. So this will be shared with you. So this is a new little, I can press spacebar to group responses. So I've never done this before, so I kind of learn out loud. So it's sorting circles from squares. And let's see what we get for themes. So the noise I complain about is permitted. Lack of enforcement was 7 responses. Insufficient follow-up, 4 responses. Inadequate response, 4 responses. Interesting. Okay, let's just see what we get with new responses. Technology limitations. No interest in using technology to solve the problems. Okay. All right. Well, amazing. So with that, I'm going to actually now pause sharing. And thank you very much for your participation, everyone. That's great. So I think now it is time for a presentation from ML&S. And with that, I am going to turn it over now to Diana and Mitch. And if Diana and Mitch, if you guys can then, I'm going to replace the spotlight with Diana, and then I'm going to add Mitch to the spotlight. And there you go. So you should be able to share your screen. Please introduce yourselves, your team, and we are looking forward to what you have to share.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ingrid, for organizing this event. And thank you, everyone, for taking your lunch hour to come listen to us and talk about noise. My name is Dianne. I'm a Policy Development Officer at Municipal Licensing and Standards. And I'm joined by my wonderful colleagues, Mitch here, Joanna, and our Noise Enforcement Supervisor, Leo. And we'll be sharing a short presentation with questions and discussion for you after. Okay, so hope you can see my screen. Awesome. Okay, so the purpose of our presentation today here is to provide an overview of the noise bylaw and how it's enforced, and we'll provide an overview of some of the key changes to the bylaw and upcoming work. So in a city as vibrant as Toronto, certain levels of noise are reasonable and reflect a life in a densely populated city. The noise bylaw aims to strike a balance between the city's vibrancy with the needs of residents and visitors and provides time restrictions and sound level limits for various types of noise. So noise is actually managed at the city level, and it's also managed at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels as well. Under our noise bylaw, we regulate animal noise. We also regulate residential air conditioners and also stationary motor vehicle noise. But there's a lot of noise that's also regulated at the provincial and federal levels. For example, aircraft noise, railway noise, and also moving motor vehicle noise. This is a chart here that shows the level of service requests that ML&S has been receiving over a couple of years. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but as Carleton mentioned earlier, noise is one of our top service requests. And of course, amplified sound, construction sound, unreasonable and persistent noise has always been the top categories of noise complaints that we receive. Getting into noise bylaw enforcement, because we receive so many service requests each year for noise, we have a dedicated noise enforcement team that was introduced in 2019, and we have a total of 31 bylaw enforcement officers with late night coverage to enforce our noise bylaw. They have specialized technical training to be able to take sound level measurements. And as you see on the left-hand side, this is a picture of our wonderful colleagues at Municipal Licensing and Standards. Each case is dealt on a case-by-case basis, and there's a priority response model to assess service requests by urgency, frequency, and also impact. I do want to note that our bylaw enforcement officers are not emergency responders, which means that they do not have authority to immediately stop a noise event. Officers also do not respond to demonstrations, noisy parties, or people noise, such as yelling, screaming, and fighting. This is all within the purview of the Toronto Police Service. Here's a little bit of a map or a visual of what happens in the back end when a noise complaint is received. Starting on the left-hand side, when there's a complaint received by 311, our bylaw enforcement officers are assigned to assess the complaint based on our priority model and if it meets the bylaw standards. And the bylaw officer will then contact the resident to gather more information and also evidence. If there is a possible bylaw infraction, the officer will then conduct an investigation that could include a site visit or taking sound level measurements. And the officer will then take steps to resolve a complaint, focusing first on education and then referral to mediation, and then taking enforcement action if necessary. I want to provide a little bit of context of events that led up to our 2023 implementation review. In October 2019, the new noise bylaw came into effect, and there were quantitative limits that were added to our bylaw. This was from a very comprehensive policy review to develop the noise bylaw. During the pandemic, staff were redirected to enforce the public health orders, and in 2022 of July, we responded to some outstanding council directives. In January and all the way to February 2024, staff did a comprehensive review and an implementation review of the noise bylaw. This is a picture at one of our consultations, and City Council had directed staff to review the successes and challenges of the noise bylaw. I do want to stress that our implementation review was not an overhaul of the bylaw, but really to look at the successes and the challenges of the bylaw and identify areas for improvement. There are many aspects involved into this work, including technical advice from our acoustic engineering firm, broad public consultation, which some of you may have attended. And if you see on the left-hand side, this is an example of our in-person event that we did. We had third-party public opinion research, a lot of written feedback and engagement from interested parties. And we did, of course, our policy and jurisdictional research. Outcomes of the 2023 implementation review. In February and March of 2024, City Council approved changes to the noise bylaw, which aim to regulate the level of noise more effectively by clarifying definitions and provisions, improving compliance and enforcement, and streamlining the noise exemption permit. Council also adopted a phased-in approach for implementation. This weekend, we had a lot of changes that came into effect for specific prohibitions such as amplified sound and motor vehicle noise. And then in September, we have other amendments, including exemption permits. This will give us a little bit of time at the city end to make some technological changes. I'm going to pass on to Mitch, who will be speaking to some of our key changes.
Oh, great. Thanks, Diana. And hi, everyone. My name is Mitch Thibault. I'm a policy and planning advisor with Municipal Licensing and Standards. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. I see some familiar names and people in the chat, so thanks so much for engaging on this. I'm going to speak to some of the key changes that are coming into effect this spring and summer, and also to speak to some additional work that is ongoing in this space. And then we're looking forward to getting to the discussion and answering some questions from you folks in the chat and through Ingrid, because I'm sure there is a lot of them. So I just want to clarify some of the details of some of the bylaw changes that resulted from this implementation review. And we're beginning to kind of phase these in currently with the noise team kind of amending their operational processes and getting out in the field and seeing how these changes are working for communities across the city. So the first is on amplified sound. We strengthened the rules for this section by lowering the nighttime indoor limits for amplified sound. So this category in the noise bylaw is measured with by specific decibel limits. So we go out with a sound level meter and we measure those limits from the point of reception, so where that sound is being heard from. In addition, in the amplified sound section, we also added musical instruments such as drums to clarify that they're also captured by this section, and with the decibel limits applying to these sorts of activities, as sometimes they may not be technically amplified, but they can still produce really excessive sounds, just providing some clarity in the bylaw. Next is focusing on some special qualities of sound. I think we heard through the consultations last year and it's the beginning of this year at committee and council that certain qualities of sound like hissing and humming or buzzing really can has a pretty significant public health impact and an impact on people's general mental health. So we want to try and operationalize some specific provincial noise guidelines to try and control for some of these special qualities, like more tonal qualities and impulses of sound. So this will kind of allow us to have a bit more of a holistic response to some of the public health impacts of sound that we heard during consultations. The next piece is on motor vehicle noise, which I know is a huge concern for a lot of residents in particular areas across the city. So city staff implemented council direction to add a noise decibel limit for stationary motor vehicle noise. We did have a motorcycle decibel limit, but we've introduced one for motor vehicles as well. That's effective as of June 1st. And as Ingrid mentioned, I think motor vehicle noise is an area that is incredibly difficult from an enforcement perspective. Our enforcement staff don't have the authority to pull over moving vehicles. So we will be working with the Toronto Police. We have their support over the next few months to do some enforcement initiatives. So the police are able to pull over some noisy vehicles and we can do some of the sound level measurements. So it's really important for us to try and build these relationships with other enforcement bodies and get out to start implementing these new decibel limits. And lastly, we'll also be incorporating some definitions for vibration into our bylaw as well, just to make sure that we're capturing potential impacts of bass and other impacts of vibration, particularly on people's health. Lastly, I want to just clarify that we've, through our staff report at the beginning of this year, have updated our noise monitoring fees to be fully cost recovery, essentially by just ensuring that the full cost of the city of any monitoring are covered by an exemption permit holder. So there are lots of events that happen, across the city, particularly in the summer, and they might need a noise exemption permit, and we might require noise monitoring. So it's ensuring that we're recovering the full costs of doing all of that work. Another key change that is effective this month is some changes to some of our definitions in the bylaw, which are more of some technical changes, I would say, but mainly we've made some amendments to the definition of what a point of reception is to broaden it a bit and provide some flexibility for staff, depending on the specific noise issue. Next slide, Dianne. Wonderful. So there's a second phase of some of these noise bylaw changes that will be in effect September 1st. And the main change here is we're really focusing on modernizing the noise exemption permit process. And what we're doing is introducing activity-based exemption permits to differentiate between lower and higher impact activities, and making sure that we are applying and requiring additional conditions for higher impact permits, those that are going to have the most impact on community, that are going to last the longest, that are going to disturb people the most. We want to make sure we're applying some specific conditions. We've also made some bylaw changes to strengthen some of the conditions that we can apply. For example, make the distribution of exemption permit to surrounding neighbors a requirement, to require the installation of some noise mitigation, tools or equipment, and also to require the specific orientation of noise equipment or speakers in a particular direction. And lastly, on the noise exemption piece, we've just added an exemption for not-for-profit organizations specifically just for the fees. So they, of course, would still have to apply for a permit. We want to make sure we're just reducing the barrier for smaller kind of community-based events that are happening in the city. All right, so some additional work and updates on the noise file. I think after we went to committee and council with some of these bylaw changes, we went kind of right into the city's budget process in February. And council did approve some additional enforcement staff for the noise team, which has really increased our complement and will hopefully allow for staff to get to those 18,000 service requests a bit more efficiently. One thing that I think we're seeing in the chat a lot is related to the 311 intake process. I think we've heard this from No More Noise Toronto and a lot of other resident organizations through our consultations. I think the main concern is that we currently are only taking in service requests for issues that are a clear bylaw violation. So we are working with 311, and we hope this month to launch what we're calling a non-enforceable service request pathway to allow for a noise complaint for, let's say, a leaf blower during permitted hours in the bylaw. We understand that this may still be a disturbance to you. We want to make sure that there is a way for you to submit that complaint to the city, so we kind of have a bit more of aggregated data about what a lot of the noise concerns in this city are, regardless if it is a clear bylaw violation or not. So we're really happy to continue to involve resident associations and the public on these changes. And we'll also be conducting some broader public education campaigns into the summer and the fall to educate the city about these bylaw changes and some of the other work that we're doing. Lastly, just on some of additional next steps and ongoing work, we'll also be reporting back to City Council in the final quarter of this year on some directives that we got from City Council related to amplified sound and also to overnight waste collection noise. I know Councillor Saxe is on the call. I mentioned that was an issue for her, and she provided us with some direction to consider how we can think about reducing and mitigating noise for overnight waste collection. So we'll be reporting back to City Council with some research and options later in the year. Wonderful. So this deck will get, I think, tossed around to participants. But we want to thank you so much for allowing us to just provide this presentation. I know it's like so much information trying to get through and summarize all the work that's been done and that's to come. But this is our contact information. We have Joanna, the manager of the policy team, online as well. Our contact info is there. We've also just linked the noise webpage, and of course, encourage you to submit a noise complaint to 311 so we can respond to it. So thanks so much for your attention, and I'll pass it off to Ingrid for the next phase of this webinar.
There's my unmute button. All right, thank you. Add spotlight. Okay, so thank you very much for that presentation. As always, they are high level, and so there's always detail that follows from that. And so I'm going to start off with where I was looking in the chat with waste collection noise. And I'm going to be representing, I'm representing the residents here. And so there's a lot of residents who are very unhappy about it. It was something that was put in without public consultation, kind of slid in, I think, to another bill. And so my question is, I guess, how did this come about? And if we can't go there, how can this possibly be reduced, and how can we push back? Because like I have actually had my meters where those machines are working, where those trucks are working, and they are the perfect noise making machine, 107 decibels every time those bins come back. And I know Councillor Saxe was great in putting forward a motion basically about let's work with the operators, but these people need relief now. I mean, there is no way you can sleep with the window open. What about bumpers on those bins so that it's not metal on metal? Like how, and what can we do as residents to really voice our concerns? Because I mean, it's bad enough getting woken up at night, never mind by a garbage truck. And I understand that there might be more exemptions coming for deliveries and that. So can you share with us what we can do to protect our health on this one?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. I did see a lot of kind of comments and concerns coming on the chat about waste collection noise. So clarify that waste collection noise right now is exempt in the noise bylaw, and it was approved by council in July of 2022. So essentially, it was not kind of a city staff initiated exemption. This was something that came through committee and council in July of 2022. And the item is EC 31.4. So you can see, I'm not sure exactly what councillors at the time, but they did submit this exemption, and it did pass and was added into the bylaw after that. And I think we definitely, during our consultations this past year, were trying to sort through a lot of these issues and trying to balance both, I think, the industry need to focus on ensuring safety, controlling for public health and order, being able to collect some waste overnight with a lot of resident concerns about being disturbed about, particularly overnight waste collection noise. So I think, in the short term, to balance the need of residents and kind of in the sector, we are working with 301 to have a specific waste collection noise pathway available so we can begin to understand the breadth of the issue and some problem areas. I think we have a sense of some particular consistent issues in particular areas across the city. We want to get a better sense of that using some evidence-based data. And then, as I mentioned, we are working towards that final quarter report on waste collection noise, and we'll be responding to Councillor Saxe's direction to consider what options we have and what industry might be able to do to mitigate particularly the overnight waste collection noise, because that is a particular concern. And lastly, just on late night deliveries and delivery noise. So we are limited the city in I would say our legal authority on this. So the province did make some legislative changes, during some of the COVID-19 lockdowns. And we are unable to respond to or enforce deliveries to, I think it's businesses and hotels or goods distribution facilities. That was a specific exemption that was imposed by the government of Ontario. And Ingrid, I'm happy to pass along maybe some of the details on that legislation, just so you can maybe forwarded on to participants as well. So we do have that, I say, legal limitation with those particular deliveries.
I've heard a number of times, cities are creatures of the province. And I'm like, oh my goodness, anyways. So just for everybody who's participating, one of the things that I envision with No More Noise Toronto is the development of task forces and working groups to help solve for some of these particular noise issues. We all have a very individual relationship to sound. Sirens don't bother me at all. For other people, it drives them bonkers. But sirens are also provincially regulated. And so we will have mechanisms where we can push our complaints up and see what we can do with the government, because we need to know where we need to push in order to make change. And there's no point in pushing the city if they're creatures of the province. So that's part of recognizing the collaborative relationship that we have. So, so the other thing that I was going to thank you for was taking all data at all times, all noise. And can we start calling them noise reports, please? Because complaints puts it that we are the ones being sensitive and we are the ones who are the problem, but really it's a report, because this is something that we have no defense of. So if I'm just going to put it out there, these are noise reports. Anyways, so let's go back to amplified sound, because amplified sound is not only like what I hear coming out of the Don Valley. I had a friend who lives over by Woodbine, and there was parties on Cherry Street, on Cherry Beach. So I do like to have a good time. And for anybody that knows me knows that. So I went to a club and I was listening, and of course I did a sound level measurement with my phone, and it was pumping out 80 decibels at 31.5 hertz. It was so and dBA is basically the decibel weighting to what we hear, where dBc is what we can feel. And that when that music finally stopped, it felt like I had a workout. It was wild. But this is also the same, that low frequency bass travels a long distance. It travels up, it travels through walls, it travels through concrete. And so I had people in the distillery district, for example, saying there used to be it was the Christmas market. Well, now it's the holiday market that goes 3 months. And so there's amplified sound all the time in the distillery district, and people live there. So can we talk a little bit more about amplified sound? And so I'll start with some questions maybe. And number one is, you were talking about point of reception. So if we're talking about an eating and drinking establishment, and the point of reception is someone's home, my understanding is that you need to come into the home to measure once for loud and once for quiet. How efficient is that for you guys? And I also understand that there might have been a bit of a change in that definition, point of reception. So can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. So yeah, just to clarify, we always prioritize doing an outdoor reading for point of reception first. But again, we do want to make sure we're accurately capturing where the disturbance is taking place. So there are occasions where we would want to gain access, if we're permitted, to the bedroom or the living room of a complainant to make sure we're measuring the sound where it's disturbing that individual. With that being said, we did make some changes to the definition of point of reception. It was, I would say, the previous definition was a bit restrictive about providing really kind of I would say like restrictive examples about what a point of reception is. So what we've really tried to do is broaden it a bit more, so we can, if the case permits, measure from the property line of a point of reception. So we're not, I would say, really needing to always be, disturbing someone that's submitted a noise report at like 1 a.m. if that is a concern for like a nightclub or an eating and drinking establishment or something. We definitely understand that it can be incredibly invasive to get access to someone's space in all of these cases. So I will say that change was recently made. I think there'll be a bit of kind of growing pains in officers understanding the enforceability of that language. But it does provide us with a lot more flexibility. And maybe, I don't know if Leo, you have any comments just generally about point of reception, or if I've covered it all.
I think that covers it. We really don't like, 2 o'clock in the morning going in, your child's bedroom to take sound level measurements. If we can get in exceedance outside, that's, as far as we're concerned, we're quite satisfied with that. Also, Ingrid, you mentioned why we take 2 sound level measurements before and after, or because when you're taking, anytime you take a sound level measurement, you're taking the amplified sound as well as the background at the same time. We need to separate the background from the amplified sound. So I know there could be like a huge discrepancy, but for legal purposes, we need to do that. It's a procedure that needs to be done.
And I understand that, Leo, but what I'm finding in my measurements is that the ambient is already pretty loud, especially when you're downtown like that. Then that's the thing. So when I think of an eating and drinking establishment on ground floor, and then there's condos rising on either side, the property line is not the eating and drinking establishment's property line, it's the resident's property line. So that means you have to go up to the condo. That means you have to go into that person's home. There's many places where they never ever get to 55 or 60 decibels at night. It is constantly higher than that. So if you're looking for that difference may not be there. And so then, even though these people have a white noise high ambient level, those bass beats still come through and they still wake people up and keep people, and there's no escape. Yeah. So that's kind of where as No More Noise, as Ingrid, what I'm recommending is sound level monitoring, is where because the noise takes place in the public space, and whether that's a park, whether that's a street, whether that's a laneway, those and if it's a sound level monitoring, because then you get the ambient all the time, and then you can actually see the spikes from that. So because Leo, I imagine it's frustrating to try, and my understanding is also from the residents' point of view, trying to organize a time. I mean, to come in at 1 o'clock in the morning is just so intrusive. And I'm taking sound level measurements from people's homes. I'm helping them, and they don't want me in their home. So having officers, uniformed officers, is just, I see there's a lot of room for improvement here.
I'm not going to disagree with you, Ingrid.
Thank you, Leo. I appreciate that. Okay, so the other thing, ambient level, so motor vehicle noise. Let's talk a little bit about that, because that is predominantly the most invasive noise source that we have across the city. So there was somebody that was somebody here in the chat was mentioning about, well, and other people have mentioned about vehicle inspections. And so as a condition of licensing or as a condition of insurance, why don't we do more checks? And the other piece is, so the city can monitor stationary vehicles. So can you actually go, if we report somebody that says, okay, they idle for 10 minutes every morning or half an hour every morning outside my home, can you actually then, if that person reports it, what is the process for enforcing stationary vehicle noise? Let's just start there, and then we'll go to the moving vehicle. So stationary noise, how do you enforce that?
Yeah, it does depend on the issue. I think for us, I think we recognize that many of the complaints about motor vehicle noise are about vehicles that are moving, that are, driving down the Gardiner with a muffler that has been modified. And like stunt racing is an issue that causes a lot of noise complaints, we know. So for us, we really do need the Toronto Police Service on board to support enforcement, because they can pull over that vehicle and we can take a stationary noise level measurement. For idling, there are like idling bylaws in the city that are enforced by transportation services, I believe. So I think through 311, if there is a consistent or rather a persistent issue with a particular vehicle idling in a particular area, that could be submitted. And the noise team and Leo and team also respond to vehicle repair noise issues. And there's a specific time permission in the bylaw for that. If you're actively modifying a vehicle, past a certain time, we will go and enforce. So we know that this is a really intense issue for a lot of people. And I see some comments in the chat, like, is this a level of government issue? That is part of this, because the Highway Traffic Act, or the HTA in the province, is enforced, by police services, and there are prohibitions under that legislation for modifying your vehicle in any way, modifying your muffler, speeding, any general unnecessary motor vehicle noise. So the Toronto Police are able to enforce actively the Highway Traffic Act at any time. So we've worked with them well in the past, and we really hope to be continue to strengthen that relationship through some specific enforcement initiatives with their staff. I hope that
Yeah.
answers your question. There's many parts to it, of course.
Well, yeah, well, on that note so we are, so for those of you that don't know, ML&S did ask No More Noise Toronto to help find locations, potential locations for vehicle enforcement blitzes. And I'm going to post that in a moment. But can you just, so once a location is determined where a vehicle enforcement blitz or event, I'm trying to call it event now, is going to happen. So I'm assuming that you or the noise enforcement team and some City of Toronto police officers will be standing by. So somehow, and this is probably a question for the police, how do they determine what vehicles they pull over? Hopefully they hear them. But I'm thinking that should be the first cue, but and then how does it work? So then you guys set up your station, but I'm assuming that the Toronto Police, so at least when I chatted with them, they said, well, you guys are doing your sound level tests. They're going to look for tinted windshields, tinted lights, all of those other things. So if somebody gets stopped, they won't get stopped for just one thing, if it in fact true. And just as a note, Highway Traffic Act fine for an improper muffler is $110. The city bylaw fine is $500. So
Yes.
please tell us how that process works.
For sure. Yeah, and to clarify, the city has made various requests to the province to increase those fine amounts. We don't have authority, of course, to change the levels of provincial fines. And we've also made pretty consistent requests to the province to make some legislative changes so we can focus on noise radar equipment, which I know, Ingrid, you're well aware of and have done a lot of research on. So we're trying to make these consistent requests and engage with the province on things that they could do to support the city in enforcing some of these initiatives, particularly with the vehicle noise initiatives. And Leo can correct me if I'm wrong, but it would usually start with a subjective test about, this particular vehicle is either speeding or is excessively noisy, or it sounds like it might have a modified muffler, or there's another traffic offense or traffic issue. And the TPS officer would then appropriately pull that car over. There are some, I would say, technical restrictions to doing a test. So we do need to choose locations that provide us with appropriate space to take a measurement. We take it close to the muffler, and we also would do some measurements about, other things that could impact a sound level measurement, things like wind levels, weather, all of that. So it, of course, depends on the day itself, but we do pick these locations based on our complaint levels, on TPS data, on any data we're going to get from community, and then also just based on some of the operational limitations about, where cars can park, where TPS officers and bylaw officers are safe to be working. And that kind of all informs where we will be strategizing and doing these initiatives. I think Ingrid might be frozen a little bit. That's okay. I'm not sure, Leo, do you have any additional comments on the motor vehicle noise piece?
Well, essentially, police need reasonable grounds to, pull someone over. They're not going to go after, a Tesla and, pull that over and say, could be noisy. No, it'll be a vehicle that they suspect, could be in contravention of the noise bylaw, as well as possibly the HTA. Then they would, take that vehicle over to our location. Our officers would be present there, and they would take sound level measurements, during that time in order to determine whether there's in compliance or not in compliance.
Wonderful. Thanks, Leo. Might just parse through the chat and see if there are any other questions we can just get to now. Joanna, do you have any?
Yeah, why don't I take
ahead.
over moderating because I've been watching the chat here. What about neighbor to neighbor noise? I know it's a really tough one.
Yes. Yeah, this is I think a pretty consistent issue with our staff. We hear that people um are having issues with neighbors either being loud just with like maybe parties or loud talking, like moving of furniture or just like playing music. So there are occasions where we would respond if there are, unreasonable and persistent neighbor to neighbor noise issues. But we understand there are sometimes sensitivities about neighbors wanting to not necessarily share the information that their neighbor is having this noise complaint or might not want to approach that neighbor. But one thing we are trying to do is establish a better working relationship with a community mediation organization called the Neighborhood Group. So sometimes we understand that that enforcement is not always the best case to respond to some of these issues. That might not just be about noise; it might be about a wide range of different kind of neighbor to neighbor conflicts. So there is community mediation that is available through this organization, and we do make referrals at times. So just encourage neighbors to try and work together to come to a solution instead of first focusing on enforcement action. So that's the kind of one thing that we're focusing on in this next phase of our work on the noise bylaw. Joanna?
I can add something extra
Sure.
in regards to neighbor and neighbor. Need to identify whether we're talking tenants living within the same landlord or condominium complexes. Because if it's a tenant in a landlord situation, there's a great opportunity for the complainant or the person who's shall we say making the notification of the noise to their landlord, because under the Landlord and Tenant Act, there's a responsibility upon the landlord to provide reasonable quiet to the tenant. Also, they have, the superintendents can come and collect, evidence if there are issues a lot quicker than we can come, from an office in order to collect any evidence. So we see that as a first step, and if there's any issues in respect of landlords not, supporting the issue. There are times when our officers reach out to the landlords and suggest that they do have a responsibility to look after these matters. So it's just not always us. You may find that there's greater authority and power through other legislative means. I know we've had one case where through a condominium corporation, they compelled the person to actually end up having to move and sell their unit as a result of the issues that they were creating. So
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Leo. That's really some great info for folks. I'm not sure if Ingrid's back online on a different computer. I'm not sure if she wants to jump back in.
Hi, everyone. I have no idea what happened. I consider that that is the worst internet gremlins I've ever had. Well, thank you so much. So we are at 12:53. I can't share my screen or anything right now, but you guys work. So what are we at? We're at 12:53. So I think what we can do from here is, I wanted to let people know that in my chat, I actually had a whole bunch of links regarding a vehicle inspection survey that we have going out until tonight, until to midnight tonight, June 4th, and we have over 770 responses. And it's very clear that vehicle noise is a huge issue for many people. We were going to kind of drop off at 12:55 because I recognize that people need to do probably a couple more things before they go for lunch. But I do encourage some people, if you have a couple more minutes, stay on. Sounds like great conversation was being happening here, and I'm going to go and try and figure out my my last my internet connection. And if I can't figure it out, then I'm just going to jump back in here with Joanna. But if if people have to drop off before I come back, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Visit nomoreNoiseToronto.com, and we'll be in touch soon. And hopefully I will be in touch on Zoom in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Ingrid. Okay, I'm going to go through the chat. So everyone feel free to drop off, but we'll continue to ask a few more questions. Okay, so I saw a question about pets. So super noisy, barky dogs, for example. Can we comment on that?
Yes, we can. So there are provisions in the bylaw related to animal noise. It's section 2.2. So any person permitting, their pet or animal to cause persistent noise, so things like barking, whining, we would respond to. I wouldn't say it's a significant portion of our service requests, and it would have to be a persistent issue. We wouldn't respond to kind of a one-off, 30 seconds of a dog barking because the mailman's at the door, but we do respond to any persistent issue related to animal noise. Leo? I may have spoken out of turn.
We have animal services that would look after.
Yes, apologies,
Any animal noises, and they would, they have their own procedures and operational system in order to, shall we say, look for compliance, within the circumstances.
Correct, yeah. And our team also works with animal services, and we do a lot of policy work for them as well. And I know they would respond to these animal noise issues because there also might be, potential animal welfare issues or other things in a separate bylaw that they could respond to and seek compliance on. So yeah, great question.
Great. Okay, there's a recent question about noise radar. I know you covered it a little bit in terms of, but can you speak a bit about the provincial changes that are needed and the technology and just where it's at right now?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. Yeah, I see it in the chat a lot. There have been a lot of cities who have piloted this equipment that essentially uses kind of a noise sound level meter and pairs it with a camera to try and find specific vehicles that are exceeding, a decibel threshold. So we're continuing to engage with a lot of these jurisdictions who are piloting it. We do recognize that there are some kind of like technological limitations on the equipment, maybe not being able to clearly identify the vehicle. But for us, the largest issue is a legal issue in that the province would have to make some amendments to the Highway Traffic Act to allow us to pilot this equipment. So we've made, I think, 2 requests over the last year and a half or 2 years to encourage the province to look into this, because we also understand that, many other jurisdictions in Ontario might be interested in eventually piloting this equipment. And then it wouldn't require us to always be out and about with Toronto Police, but a bit more of an automated response. So we are always looking at new research. We're always engaging with our counterparts in other jurisdictions to understand how this technology and equipment is developing and modernizing year over year.
Yeah, and I would just add there's some comments here about advocacy to the province. Of course, they are a key part of many of there are many intersections here. So for sure, if you have something today to say to our provincial counterparts, I would invite you to definitely make that. It would be the Minister of Transportation would be specifically around vehicle noise and the noise radars as well. So direct it to those groups. Okay, I saw some questions about buskers. What should people do if they see buskers regularly at a corner making lots of amplified sound?
This is an interesting one because technically it is also kind of like a licensing and permit issue, because buskers in the city do require a permit. And there are some, I would say, additional restrictions on amplified sound. So I mean, the best way for us to respond to these issues is to submit a complaint through 301, so we know exactly where the issue is. I know particularly in like Yonge and Dundas Square, the noise team works with our other public spaces enforcement teams at ML&S to focus on a wide range of community safety and nuisance issues. And we would respond to no amplified sound or excessive amplified sound from a busker. Leo, any additional comments on that in that response to busking?
That's pretty well. That actually buskers aren't allowed to use amplified sound. So if you see them on city property, with an amplifier. Our public spaces team would be the ones that would go out because they're the ones that enforce the buskers, portion of the bylaw, and they would, look after that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I've got maybe we'll just do one or two more questions here. So Louis Eric is asking a question for Leo. Is there a relationship between a fine's cost and the risk, I'm gonna mess up this name, but basically reoffending? Do we, so our approach to fines versus say compliance, like, can you talk just a bit more about our general approach to enforcement and the role that fines play?
Well, fines is really a tool for us to try to compel compliance. First off, when a problem is found, we go through the communication portion and we try to achieve, voluntary compliance, keep the stereo down, et cetera, things along that line. If they don't follow our discussions and they're found in contravention of the bylaw, our normal first step would be to issue a ticket, be it, let's say, a $500 fine. Following that, if they continue to be in contravention of the bylaw, and then we go what would be called a Part 3 or a summons. What that means is that you have to appear in court. That means the maximum fine you'd be facing is $100,000, and it depends on the circumstances. But, it's just not a ticket where you can just pay it and walk away. You're going to have to, deal with the matter, through the court system. So it's an escalating system. We don't go automatically to to the top end. What we're trying to do here is try to get cooperation. We're looking for compliance. We're not in. I know many times when you're disturbed, you want to find that person and you want to say I need to get my revenge and pound of flesh. But that's not really where our job is. And I know sometimes it can be frustrating. And I know many times for the officers, it can be frustrating because sometimes they may want to escalate to the top if they can. But these are the procedures, and that's to me, it makes sense because you have to look at it. How would a court perceive these?
For sure. Thanks, Leo. Dana, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I was going to say that for a lot of our bylaws, like noise, for example, we take an education first approach because we want everyone the opportunity to learn about our bylaw, and also like a community-based approach. That's why we work with the neighborhood group because they provide community-based mediation services to help address some of the root issues. And sometimes we recognize that enforcement going through with a fine right away is not always the best approach. So we always take an education first approach so everyone can learn about the bylaw.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's do one last question. There have been a few about stationary noise sources. So there's a sump pump, a super noisy sump pump. I know noisy air conditioners are an issue. Can you say what someone could do and what is our ability to enforce and just, the rules around those?
Yes, for sure. I can start and maybe I'll pass to Leo because it's a bit of a complicated area, but it is kind of combined responsibility with the city and with the province. So we do respond to stationary source noise, and this month we also just introduced some different and lower decibel limits for those sources that we would appropriately enforce if there were an issue and a service request submitted. There are some rules through the province that kind of regulate environmental compliance approvals with particularly stationary sources that they would appropriately respond to, or any kind of like industrial source. So we always make sure to engage the province about any particular complaint. But Leo, anything to kind of supplement what I've summarized?
Yeah, there may be circumstances. If it's an industrial noise matter, the company may already have what's called a certificate of approval with the Ministry of the Environment, and if they have that, and if they're in compliance with their approval, they're exempt from our legislation. If they're not, let's say a restaurant exhaust system, not likely to have, an approval process, we would then, go out and take sound level measurements. And my recollection is the sound level limits have been reduced for stationary sources. Previously, it was 50 across the board, 24/7. Now it's 50 from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., 11 p.m. on to 7 a.m. It's being dropped to 45 dBA, which I feel is significant. We've also, in my mind, made major strides and improvements in the indoor sound level limits. Previously, it was 50 on the inside. Now it's 45 on the inside, the same hours, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. and from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. it's dropped down to 40. Mind you, at those extremely low levels, there's lots of, shall we say, background noise, the refrigerator running, the clock ticking, etc., that can bring up the sound, and plus the traffic, from the outside, that can bring up the background noise where you're living. So 40 may not be the standard. It may end up being the background noise, at that time period. So it's going to be a little bit technical. I'm excited to get these lower levels because I've been involved in too many situations where I feel really really bad for the people being exposed to the levels, and we didn't have the legislation to do it. Now we do. So I'm looking forward to the next phase.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank Joanna for giving me her headset here. Folks, I'm really sorry. I was just completely disconnected from Zoom, couldn't do anything. So, I'm just really thankful that we all got co-hosts here and this continued to record. So the chat will be recorded. This is being recorded. And I understand there was great conversation while I was off managing my gremlins. So I just want to thank everybody for your time, your attention today, for your participation in this. This is how we start creating change, is by connecting with each other and understanding, because noise is a new old problem, and often our bylaws have, they're lagging behind in where we need to be today. And so I'm just so glad that Municipal Licensing and Standards is willing to engage and hear from us about how noise impacts our health. So I will share the Menti slides with you towards the end. I know some of you completed them. If you just can continue to do that, that would be great. But Joanna over here, thank you so much. Diana, Mitch, Leo, thank you so much for your time today. And everyone out there, I appreciate your support in No More Noise Toronto. We are growing. We are looking to move ahead and look at working in these different levels of government. If we can get some good wins here municipally, then we can just push that up to the provincial and to the federal levels, because vehicle noise is something that goes across the whole country and it impacts everyone. So with that, I want to say thank you very much. And MLS team, kudos to you. Thanks for showing up. And everybody else, thank you as well. Have a great day. And I wish you all a good sleep with the window open, hopefully. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you. There's my leave button. Leave webinar.